If you had a friend who had $100,000 in credit card debt, and you go to them and you say, "Hey, get your life together, bro. You ain't going to be able to keep taking on more credit card debt and eventually get out of it." And they say, "Okay, cool, chill, 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 chill. I'm getting one more new credit card, but instead of a $5,000 limit, it'll be 2,500. So I'm lowering my limit on debt that I take out." You'd be like, "Okay, that's a step in the right direction, kinda, but you're still spending more than you take in." And that's exactly what the Republicans are doing right now. Unfortunately, I've said this all along. The Republicans have to raise the debt ceiling. They just have to. And if you're one of those people who thinks politics is going to save us from the math, and somebody who gets in charge who's fiscally responsible, keeping in mind that debt is a bipartisan political issue, they love it, both sides. But even if you had somebody who thinks like me in charge in Washington, I couldn't do anything because our debt is so behemothly massive. We don't make enough money in taxes. We can't pay it off. And so the debt has to grow, even if we don't deficit spend, even if we don't spend more than we take in taxes. The one thing that will grow is the interest rate on our debt. So that's something we don't really have a lot of control over. Therefore, it's a death spiral. The question is, how long will it take? The Republicans are trying to slow it down, but Kevin McCarthy just came out and said, "Hey, Biden, come to the negotiating table because we want to spend less deficit spending." That means we want to raise the debt ceiling. So you got to think to yourself, okay, so they want to spend less. They still want to raise the debt ceiling. Why would you have to raise the debt ceiling if you want to spend less? Because we spend more than we take in taxes, significantly so. Which, by the way, if you add it up, it can be inflationary, especially if they're direct transfer payments like welfare, etc. So if we're printing money or taking out treasuries and transferring it for Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, that can be inflationary, for sure. It's dollars chasing goods and services that didn't come out of the economy, and it's debt that we're taking potentially from the U.S., but a lot of times from foreign governments. So we're taking that debt and then we're pumping it back into the U.S. economy through Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, etc. So let's listen to old Kevin talk about his proposal. And by the way, I'm cheering big time for us to hit the debt limit. I love it because all of this really highlights for Americans we cannot have our cake and eat it too. We're in big trouble. And I want to warn people to protect themselves. But if you listen to politicians, they're gonna downplay it. Obviously, the Treasury Secretary is going to downplay it. The Federal Reserve is going to downplay it. They have to. I told you this. It's self-fulfilling prophecy. If they come up on the mic and say, "Hey, guess what? We're screwed." Would you do that? You're a coach of a baseball team. You're like, "Hey, guys, we suck and we're screwed." You probably wouldn't do that. So they got to do the same thing because if they say we're screwed, people react in the market accordingly. So all that to say, if you want the truth, you got to go somewhere else. All right, so let's listen to Kevin. Kevin has a deal for Joe Biden.
Let's increase right now.
So he'll increase the debt limit right now.
If you gave your child a credit card and they kept maxing it out to the limit, you wouldn't blindly just raise the limit. You'd change their behavior. That exact same thing is true with our national debt. We need to lower.
So we're going to change their behavior by saying, "Hey, you can't have a $5,000 limit. You can have a $2,500 limit. And then we'll take on another credit card to pay off that $2,500 you just took out." So we're not stopping overspending. We're just slowing it down. It's better than nothing. Give them that. That's why we have to raise the debt ceiling. We're still going to overspend beyond tax receipts.
Inflation. Reduce our dependence on China and lift Americans out of poverty. America has a $31 trillion debt, and Washington is on the clock. But what are Democrats doing? President Biden is skipping town to deliver a speech in Maryland rather than sitting down to address the debt ceiling. He's giving America's debt the southern border treatment. Ignore it and hope that it goes away. In fact, he's been avoiding the issue for 77 straight days and counting. Now, Senator Schumer, he's just missing in action. Rather than find common ground with the House, Senator Schumer is having the Senate vote on a non-binding resolution commending and congratulating the University of Connecticut men's basketball team for winning the 2023 men's basketball championship. Now, that's not all Senator Schumer's been doing. Just last month, he's approved March at Maine's. Today, I'm proud to announce that we are introducing the Limit, Save, Grow Act of 2023. This responsible legislation will be led by our budget chairman, Jody Arrington. Would responsibly raise the debt limit into next year.
Don't you love the dystopian wordage? Responsibly raise credit card debt. Look, folks, I hate to be doom and gloom all the time. But our best hope is just slowing it down. So, hey, more power to them. The more we press on the gas, it's going to get worse. So I'd love to slow it down, which is what they're doing. But there is no such thing as responsibly raising the debt ceiling. There's really no such thing as government investment. We spend too much. We promise too much. They don't want to break those promises. So fair enough. That just means more debt. One thing they can't control, the interest rate on the debt.
And provide more than $4.5 trillion in savings to the American taxpayer. Now, here's how we do it. First, we limit government spending.
All for that.
Our plan would return discretionary spending to pre-inflationary fiscal year 2022 levels. And then limit
fiscal year 2022. Do you remember what we were spending money on that we weren't spending money on in 2019? Can you think of it? And yet they're like, it's like this. Have you ever heard Republicans or Democrats driving the speed limit? Like, okay, hey, guys, we've been overspending for the last 3 years and it keeps going up. Can we just go to last year's spending, which was overspending? Gotta love it.
The growth of spending to 1% per year. Now, these are the same levels we had just.
All right, so here is something very key. Limit the growth of spending to 1% a year. Why does this matter so much? Well, when Democrats and Republicans come to the table and they say, hey, all right, this is how much we spent last year. We have a 1% increase in our spending allocation. What are we going to spend it on? And then somebody pipes up and says, hey, guys, our debt payment, interest only, went up 10% last year. You see the problem? So if they're trying to contain spending to raise it 1% a year, the percentage of our federal budget that interest takes up is going to be more and more and more and more. So what are they going to have to cut from? Everything else, which, politicians like to use people as human shields with this debt limit thing. They're like, you want to kill grandma, Social Security, you want to kill veterans, you want to cut blah, blah, blah. They can still spend on all that. They just have to cut elsewhere. But they don't want to do that. Which, hey, I don't agree with cutting veterans benefits and Social Security, these contracts, before you cut other things like government employees, federal government, middle management, bureaucracy. Yes, cut that. But if this goes through, that would be a real big problem for people in politics, because they like to raise by a lot more than 1%. And the one thing they don't have control over as a percentage of the budget is the interest payment. All right, let's continue listening to Kevin.
4 months ago, I didn't hear, Mr. Speaker, a single Democrat complain about that level of spending. These spending limits are not draconian, they're responsible. Federal spending exploded in the past 2 years when Democrats controlled all. And that doesn't include the trillions of COVID-era spending. But limited government spending will reduce inflation and restore fiscal discipline in Washington.
Mhm.
If Washington wants to spend more, it will have to come together, find savings elsewhere, just like every single household in America. Now, second, we're going to save taxpayers money. Mr. Speaker, the pandemic is over. House Republicans have already passed a bill to officially end the pandemic. And President Biden signed it into law just last week. Our bill would actually claw back billions of dollars of unspent COVID money that has sat for the last 2 years. The American people are tired of politicians who use COVID as an excuse for more extreme inflationary spending. Now, if this money
Some are. Some, if those politicians promise them a stimmy check, they'd love it.
was authorized to fight the pandemic, but was not spent during the pandemic, it should not be spent after the pandemic is over. Our proposals also repeal Biden's army of 87,000 IRS agents. Now, that will save taxpayers $70 billion, and it's going to protect the families and the small businesses from weaponizing the IRS. It will end the green giveaways for companies that distort the market and waste
All right, you
taxpayers'
get it.
money.
Do you think Biden's going to go for this? Do you think the Democrats are going to go for this? We'll see. I political mudslinging, it's what it is. Chuck Schumer is doing this with up in Maine, and who cares? The math, right? The math is what matters, not to the politicians, but to you. And the situation we're in is a big problem. It's a big problem, as I've said many, many times. So now that Kevin McCarthy, I love to see how he voted over the last 2 years when it came to more government spending. I'm sure he was all for it. So wherever the political winds go, right? If the average citizen goes, hey guys, I want a stimmy, Kevin will vote for it. And then if there's inflation from the stimmy, Kevin will be like, I've always been fiscally responsible. But at the end of the day, who cares? What really matters is where does the rubber meet the road? The rubber meets the road in the fact that we overspend every single year, and that overspending has some politicians getting voted back into office because they help their friends, right? So now we're meeting rubber meets road, where the Republicans are saying we will not raise spending, we will not raise the debt ceiling, which is kind of their only, that's their job in Congress, unless we get these concessions. Do you think that the Democrats won't use people as a human shield and say, okay, we're not signing this because you want to kill grandma, and therefore blame Republicans for not signing legislation to raise the debt ceiling as much as they want? And they'll cut, of all the things to cut, by the way, it won't mean we will default. Because the reason I think default is off the table, meaning when I say default, it's not defaulting on Social Security payments. It's defaulting on our bond interest payments. I do not think we will do that. And the reason I don't think so is because if we do that, then taking on more debt in the form of selling bonds is a lot harder because our credit rating goes down, our interest rate goes up. So of all the things we're not going to pay, bond interest is not one of them. What I do think will happen is we'll wheel Granny out and we'll say, Granny now has to eat dog food because the Republicans, and they'll use each other and do the political mudslinging and da-da-da-da-da. So I hope it happens, to be honest, not because I want grandma to eat dog food, because that's a choice politicians are making, because they could cut a lot of other things like butterfly gender studies or whatever else they're donating money to, or war. You know, they can cut a lot of things. And it doesn't have to be Social Security. It doesn't have to be veterans benefits. But yes, of course, they're going to do that because those are the human shields. I think it'll be interesting how it plays out. The Treasury recently, it was tax day, right? And they collected taxes, and their balance sheet is a lot lower than it normally is this time of year. What does that mean? We could reach the debt ceiling, meaning Treasury general account runs out of money sooner rather than later. Sooner rather than later. And so these conversations are becoming more and more important. And if the conversations don't happen, as Kevin McCarthy alluded to, we just reach the debt ceiling. And then the Treasury goes, we don't have any more money. What do you want me to do? Because Congress has to allocate that money. Should be interesting how it plays out. But I guess my ultimate message is a lot of people out there see online, they're like, well, this political party is more fiscally responsible, and here's what they're trying to do. And hey, me personally, I'm like, hey, good for you for finally standing up and doing the right thing, yada, yada, yada. But we have so much debt, we can't get out of this problem. And so when you realize that, you don't look to a politician and say, please save us from inflation. Save us from our own stupidity in the way we vote. They can't do it. Yeah, I know. It's a little bit of a black pill, but the white pill in there is you save yourself. Buy things the government can't print more of. All right, let me know what you guys think in the comments below. See you on the next one. Peace.